Welcome folks, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you are. So I have to preface this video with spoiler warning. If you have not read Thousand Year Blood War, please click off now. This video is covering a character in the next arc, and it's impossible to talk about them or future characters without spoiling a ton of the plot. You have been warned. So, welcome again to 2 Cents Wanted. Today, as you already know, we will be discussing Lloyd and Lloyd, the Stern Ritter's Why the Yourself. So just 2 videos into the series now, and we already have an interesting situation. So this is the first time, but not the only time, we will have 2 Quincy occupying the same shrift letter. But it is the only time that the 2 Quincy actually have the same designation, which is yourself. However, the 2 Stern Ritter we'll be talking about don't have the exact same ability, but they are similar. It's a bit crazy. Interesting enough, these 2 characters have such an interesting situation, and they're not prevalent in the manga very much. If we count Lloyd's first appearance in the manga, he is in 8 chapters, but if we don't count his visage, he is just in 1 chapter in a total of 7 panels. His brother Lloyd is only seen in 3 chapters and also has a handful of panels. For the short time in the manga, only one of them has a significant impact in the series, but it must be stated that neither of them are weak. So, Lloyd. 2 videos in, like I said earlier, and we're running into a slight structure change. So, I'm going to do a small portion here on Lloyd because he is in the manga for such a small amount of time. There isn't much to say about Lloyd, so just to make this interesting, I'm going to try and glean some things from this extremely brief appearance. From birth, Lloyd and his brother Lloyd were indistinguishable from one another, even to the medical staff who delivered them, and even their own parents. They had both unconsciously begin to imitate each other since the day they were born. When they were 12 years old, they found they could not only imitate one another, but other people as well. While they could both imitate the appearances of others, only Lloyd could replicate their powers and techniques, while Lloyd could instead copy their memories and personality. On the surface, Lloyd's version of the shrift seems stronger, and ultimately it probably is, but he doesn't use it well. Lloyd's ability allows him to copy someone's appearance and their power and techniques. He potentially is a bad matchup for anyone he could face. Lloyd is either intelligent or really dumb. Looking at his brief fight with Kenpachi, Lloyd was the most difficult of the 3 people he fought, but ultimately he didn't threaten Kenpachi too much, seeing as how uninjured Kenpachi is, but in one panel it does show that both blades have blood on them, so he did cut Kenpachi. We know that in Bleach it is possible for your Ryatsu to exceed the capabilities of the shell that's holding it. In cases where someone's own spirit energy is too much for their body, it can damage itself to the point of death. Lloyd's body was actually strong enough to comfortably hold Zaraki Kenpachi's spiritual pressure. We've seen bad things happen before with Ichigo and others when their spirit energy becomes too much for them. This means that in his own right, Lloyd is very powerful and strong enough to at least hold a eye patch on Zaraki's spirit energy, which we know is still very high. Lloyd losing to Zaraki, despite being somewhat relative to him, may have come from a lack of fight IQ, I think. I'd say that because he copies Zaraki right away. Now, this doesn't seem to be a problem because copying your opponent's power level and ability at the start seems like a great way to quickly even the playing field. However, Lloyd should have known from the data book that all Stern Ritter were given about Zaraki and his eye patch. He should have known his eye patch was limiting his power, and that's what he would have copied. Zaraki says he simply got stronger when fighting a transformed Lloyd, either meaning he took his eye patch off and proceeded to kill him, or he spiked his spiritual pressure and one-shot Lloyd. I kinda like to lean towards the taking off the eye patch because it makes a bit more sense. Either way, copying an eye patch on Zaraki wasn't a very intelligent move. Now, in Lloyd's defense, there may be an explanation for this. Maybe Lloyd knew who he was going up against, which was Zaraki, and had no choice but to transform quickly or die, which wouldn't put the blame on him, just bad luck for drawing Kenpachi first. The only thing we cannot confirm about Lloyd's version of the yourself is if he can update his transformation. If he could just instantly mirror people's power, even if they got a boost, then he probably would have given Kenpachi a harder time, but he doesn't, and he dies. This is kind of also evidenced by Kenpachi saying that they were kind of going toe for toe, and then he just got stronger. He may need time to adjust, and if that's the case, Lloyd's ability is far inferior to Royd's, I think. However, I still think that if he could copy someone like Byakuya or Toshiro, he would be extremely dangerous, especially if he copied them when they were in Bankai. And that's all I really have to say about Lloyd. Again, there isn't too much you can get from his short appearance because he actually never has any speaking moments in the manga, and most of what you see of him isn't a flashback. There's one panel of him being a flashback, but he's dead the entirety that you do see him. I'm starting with Royd because Royd honestly doesn't have much personality. We know that he is very loyal to Yuha. On his deathbed, after basically being mostly incinerated by Head Captain Yamamoto, Royd feels a sense of completion because he is praised by Yuha for basically completing his task and dying for the cause. He is elated by this. His bravery and loyalty is surprising. A lot of Stern Ritter seem to be like superficially loyal to Yuha, but Royd definitely is loyal to Yuha. It's impossible to determine how much of Royd was talking to Yamamoto because Royd at the time was copying someone else's memories and appearance, which was Yuha. And I don't know how in character Royd was. Royd could have been in character the entire time while pretending to be Yuha, or he himself could have slipped through a couple times. I think maybe with the Hubert parts that may have not been Yuha, because there are times where Yuha himself doesn't seem to care about his own men, but we'll get to that once we get to the big A himself. There isn't much to say about Royd aside from his loyalty and bravery for taking on someone as terrifying as Yamamoto. So being a Quincy as Royd and Lloyd are, they both have access to all the Quincy abilities the others have access to. Since Royd is a New Age Quincy, he has a Vollständig and Schrift bestowed by him by Yuha. Hirinkaku, Heilig Bogen, Heilig File, Blut Vein, and Blut Artery, all of Royd's feats are performed under the guise of Yuha, so it's hard to determine what amount of feats actually belong to him with these different abilities, or how much of it was things he gleaned from copying Yuha. Touching back on Lloyd's section just briefly, where I mentioned about how strong he was spiritually, I think it is better showcased here with his brother Royd. Since both brothers are twins, it's not a far leap to assume Royd is extremely powerful in his own right, just like Lloyd was. Royd's spiritual pressure is enough to convince Yamamoto that he is somewhat relative to the version of Yuha that Yamamoto fought 1,000 years ago. Kenpachi Zaraki defeats 3 of the Stern Ritter, one of which is Lloyd. Royd, disguised as Yuha, takes him on in battle. Kenpachi is easily defeated by Royd. Royd literally gives Kenpachi the Yami treatment. Royd off-screens an eye-patchless Kenpachi, seemingly bare-handed, basically treating him like fodder. This isn't all that crazy, seeing as the actual Yuha basically whoops full-bring Bankai Ichigo bare-handed. So after Royd holds the bloodied fighter Kenpachi by his throat and declares Soul Society is on the brink of collapse, then Yamamoto shows up and is convinced through Royd's ability to perfectly mimic Yuha that the person in front of him is actually Yuha. If you're questioning Yamamoto's ability to identify people, he literally is one of 3 people to find a way around Kyoka Suigetsu. Back in the Fake Karakura Town arc, he does this by identifying and discriminating between Kyoka Suigetsu spiritual pressure and Aizen's, which is probably extremely similar, seeing as Zanpakuto and its user are basically one soul. I think Royd's Schrift is ridiculously powerful and deceptive, which makes it a sort of kind of difficult to face. In Giselle Jules' video, I described her Schrift as being kind of a utility Schrift, and I think Royd and Lloyd Schrift falls into the same category. Royd's Schrift won't overwhelm you with explosive firepower, and it won't stonewall you with a crazy defensive ability. It doesn't really have any hacks that would allow him to overcome people far stronger than himself, just in kind of a base sense, unless he copies someone with lots of knowledge and tricks, like Yuha. For example, Yuha has thousands of years of battle knowledge and skill. He also has access to the entirety of the Quincy spellbook and their unique weapons. This was specifically on display when Royd easily whips out a defensive Quincy spell strong enough to resist Yamamoto's Zanko no Tachi and potentially kill Yamamoto as stated if he were to touch it. Now, this part may be a bit more headcanon-y or fan theory-ish, but I know Kubo does seem to understand or have an appreciation for martial arts. I bring that up because if copying someone's memory includes muscle memory, then Royd would have the techniques and physical capability of the person he copied, especially since he also was taking on their physical likeness his body will be able to perform those physical feats, basically closing any kind of gap that someone may have in front of him. This is very impressive and makes Royd's version of the Shrift no less dangerous than his brother's. It may explain why a regular Sternritter was able to physically keep up with Yamamoto for a short amount of time. I think similar to his brother, that if Lloyd had gotten a better matchup in the Thousand Year Blood War, he could have been very difficult to beat. If he ever copied someone like Kisuke, Mayuri, or Aizen with their high level intellect, I think he could have flipped the course of the war completely. Now this section is going to be kind of short as well because it's the plot section and these brothers don't really do much. So just starting with Lloyd real quick. Lloyd got off-screen by Kenpachi. Their fight happens probably just before Yuha actually shows up to the battlefield, because Kenpachi killed 3 Sternritter and boom, they were gone and they were done. His fight, from just the brief panels we get, is he transformed into Zaraki after Berenice and Guizbat died, and their fight kind of took some time because he kind of says there was a back and forth and there is blood on Lloyd's version of Nozarashi, so that was interesting. Then moving on to Royd kind of shows up pretending to be Yuha, and instantly he's kind of just sitting there pretending to be like the villain, the bad guy with Jugo, so that kind of sells it. And then Kenpachi shows up to fight him, and ultimately it's kind of short, and again Kenpachi gets off screen like I mentioned earlier, and he takes his eye patch off during that fight, so it's kind of surprising that the fight happened the way it did. But he does easily take out Kenpachi, and it kind of does it barehanded because he blocks Kenpachi's sealed sword with just one arm, and that sealed sword has cut everything from Noitora to Yami. And then when we come back, he has Kenpachi held up by his neck, and then Yamamoto shows up. They kind of have a back and forth, talking to each other, and he kind of takes some shots in Shikai. There's a moment where 3 Sternritter jump Yamamoto from behind, and he kind of chides the Sternritter for jumping into his fight. And this is, again, I'm not sure, that seems more in line with what we know about Yuha, and not so much Lloyd. Maybe it is. Moving forward, once the Bankai is activated, you kind of see a bit of worry on Lloyd or Yuha's face in this moment, because he has his memory, so he remembers what it was like facing that Bankai, and he was clearly terrified, but he knows that it's kind of different. They then kind of have a back and forth where he realizes the difference between the Bankai before and now, and then once Zanko no Tachi is activated, it kind of goes through these stages of basically now Royd's on the back foot. He has to whip out a high-level defensive Quincy spell that has to keep him alive, but it also threatens to kill Yamamoto if he touches it. Yamamoto activates another version of his Bankai, and then it kind of really goes downhill for there. Like, Royd pretending to be Yuha is quickly outclassed, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for the Shinigami. And then he gets cut basically in half with the power of the sun, which is insane. But there really isn't much to say about the plot because it is so short. It's just a handful of chapters for both brothers, to be honest. And that's all for the video, folks. Doing this video on brothers with such similarities and so little exposure was kind of difficult. I think these two have one of the most underrated Shrifts, and they don't get talked about because of Lloyd's poor showing against one of the strongest characters, which kind of doesn't make sense, and Royd's decent showing against one of the most powerful characters in the series. I think they could do with more respect from the fan base, and I hope we actually get to see a bit more of Lloyd in the anime. I hope his fight is actually shown. I'm curious to see exactly how his fight with Zaraki went down. Lloyd is definitely powerful and may have been a member of the Schutzstaffel. We don't know. I know it's kind of a fan theory that I used to subscribe to. One final observation, though. These two characters have a very unique Shrift. I think if their ability was not split between two people, then the Shrift would, without a doubt, be one of the most OP abilities in Bleach. It would jump into the top 10 probably. A character who can copy their opponent exactly with no blind spots, or a lot of the weaknesses that you see in other mediums about people who can copy abilities. Imagine having to fight a Quincy Shunsui, Kenpachi, or Urahara even Yamamoto, with all their memories, techniques, speed, power, spirit, energy. It's terrifying. I left off people like Vizards, Ichigo, and Aizen because of their unique physiology. I don't know if the Quincy body could handle the hollow bits. But thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Please comment and tell me what you think. I love debate. Share this video so I can grow the channel, please. Happy holidays. Bye, folks.